So joining us now from the White House is Paula Reid. Paula, aside from all of this, we are also learning that the Trump administration is readying a new rule for asylum claims at the southern border. What can you tell us about that?
And Marie, this rule introduced this morning would effectively end asylum protections for migrants coming up from Central America seeking asylum in the U.S. Under this new rule, any migrants coming up from Central America through the southern border would have to have sought asylum in one of the other countries they passed through in order to be eligible here in the U.S. Now, this is supposed to go into effect tomorrow. And Anne-Marie, this new rule would even apply to children who have crossed the border alone.
So are there any exceptions? I mean, what if you make it all the way to the border and you have a legitimate claim of asylum? They would just turn you around?
If you had not already sought asylum in one of the other countries that you had passed through, yes, but they have carved out some exceptions. One is for people who have been trafficked. That will be one of the exceptions. They also say that if the only other country you've passed through is one that has not signed on to one of the major migration treaties, that could also be an exception. They also say if you sought asylum in another country and were denied, that may also carve out an exception, although that would not bode well for your asylum claim here in the U.S.
So, I mean, what are we to make of the timing? The president at times confuses me so much. You would think that this would be, something that the administration would want perhaps the media to focus on, but then there are all these other distractions, mostly, based on the president and his tweeting. But what should we make of the timing of this?
That's right. The ability to coordinate one message is one of the great mysteries of the Trump administration. Because you're right, in previous administrations, they would make sure that all the agencies were on the same page, that they pumped out the same talking points, the same message. That's not the case here at the Trump administration. But we do see some common themes. Now, let's start with Republicans' arguments for why they need this rule. They argue that a lot of people, in increasing numbers over the past several years, come into this country seeking asylum. And while most of those people pass that initial interview, a credible fear interview, most of those people do not actually end up getting asylum once they get to the end of the process. So they say they want to make a shorter stack of applications they actually have to go to. But immigration rights groups argue that this is all just part of an effort to sow fear and deter people who would be entitled to asylum here in the U.S. from even seeking to apply.
So what about the legal challenges? Because we reported the last hour that in Guatemala, it's not going to fly.
That's right. And you're referring to a plan to potentially ask people or force people who are seeking asylum in the U.S. to wait out those claims in Guatemala. That plan does not look like it's going to work out. But most of the efforts that the Trump administration has tried to do through executive order or through a rule at the border, they've just not worked out. They've been blocked by the courts. And Anne-Marie, I would expect there will be legal challenges to this rule. And in looking at it, Anne-Marie, I do think that the administration may have a difficult time defending why this rule only applies to the southern border. If you come through Canada, there is no requirement for you to follow these same rules. And I think if you take the president's rhetoric around the issue of immigration, look at this rule, you would likely see a federal judge who may implement at least a temporary injunction. It's very similar to what we saw with the first version of the travel ban. The president barred travel from certain countries, all Muslim countries. They took that coupled with his rhetoric, promising a Muslim ban on the campaign trail, and that's how the initial travel ban got blocked. It wasn't until they revised that and added other countries that they were able to get it through the courts. While this is narrowly crafted, William Barr is, of course, a two-time attorney general. I do see the potential for some legal challenges that could at least initially be successful in blocking this from going into effect tomorrow.
But here's the thing, too. There are already thousands of migrants in detention centers. Some are waiting in Mexico, as they were told to. What happens to this backlog?
So this rule will not apply to people who are already in the country. Now, you say already in the country. It's not clear what happens to people who are waiting in Mexico. It's important to remember that seeking asylum in the U.S. is a legal form of immigration. You are entitled to come here to make a plea that you believe you will be persecuted or face grave danger in your home country, and then you go through this process. Now, in terms of getting through the backlog, even though the Trump administration has thrown significant resources at getting through those hundreds of thousands of cases in the backlog, it's not clear that this rule is going to help them move through those cases any faster. But folks already here will not be subject to these requirements.
All right. Paula Reid, thank you very much.